So when you were on a flying squadron, did you feel like there was much support and help for you there?
It's really interesting because in all of what I talk about now, in terms of how I would do, how I would offer support and how I would do things differently to what I did before, I always talk about the opening up and sharing with those closest to you. And I refer to friends, I refer to family, I refer to colleagues. And when I think about my time in the service, I will always refer to what a great environment it was to be in a close knit community of people who were like minded, there for the same purpose, that we'd all been through some really tough times together. And we'd been through some good times together. We knew the best of each other. We knew how to get the most out of each other. And that sort of environment is actually perfect in terms of offering the kind of support I'm suggesting you might get from those closest to you. So there is a real sense of irony when I look back that when I was going through difficulties, that firstly I didn't recognize those in myself, but I didn't take advantage of that network that was there for me on my on my doorstep. Because I know now when I look back and I had that kind of crashing crisis that I talked about, it was apparent to everybody around me that there was a problem. I was on a flying squadron for a period of nearly 6 months. I couldn't fly while I was being given treatment
Oh,
and
right.
getting back on my feet. So that really hit me hard. But that was the opportunity to go to those on the squadron and say, hey, listen, this is the reason. These are the problems I'm facing. But if I'd done that earlier, I probably wouldn't have had that crashing crisis. And so when I'm talking about when I'm talking to others about what how you can find support, a flying squadron, a close knit environment like that, where people do know each other well, where people can see the differences in you. One of the things I talk about with my mental well being is that um, the changes in me and others you can be relatively easy to spot if you've got the if you've got the
Yeah.
awareness that things are changing. And in a flying squadron environment where you live in each other's pockets day to day, long periods of deployment, week to week, month to month, away from home, as I say, going through bad times, good times, learning what makes each other tick. That's a really good in my view, that's a really good environment for those changes to be identified or to be spotted. So I think if I was to walk into the crew room and say, hey, can we have a chat? I think I'm struggling for this reason or for that reason. It's more likely that you'll get a really supportive reaction from somebody who knows you well. And in that sort of environment says, well, actually, you're right. I've known you for 2 years. We've worked closely together, and yet I've seen a change in you recently. Ah, well, that makes sense because I've got this issue, or I've got this, this problem that I'm facing. And I think that today, the context that we're in, the contemporary context that we're in today, where the awareness around well-being, mental health, all of the interdependencies between mental health and your physical well-being, your ability to do your job, your ability to all the knock-on effects for your ability to go about your daily life. I think that is pretty well understood now, and so I think a flying squadron is it should be a really safe place to go and have that sorts of conversations. I've been a few years away from it now. I do keep a finger on the pulse in terms of activities on and around fast jet flying squadrons. And I do feel that, for those that are considering what it might be like in that environment, I think it's probably a really good and a really healthy place to have those sorts of conversations. Fortunately, unfortunately for me, all those years back, I was probably subconsciously staying away from sharing my problems for all the reasons we've already
Mhm.
discussed. And so I didn't take advantage of what should have been a good environment to be in at the time.
And one thing we haven't mentioned as well, humor is a massive part of it. If you like just a bit of humor, and then you're like, "Oh, he's the mental case," like, and then you just like kind of have a little chuckle, and it totally helps.
Yeah, it does. I think there's probably a fairly unique brand of humour when it comes to that sort of stuff on a flying squadron,
Yeah, I can
and
imagine.
and at the same time, there's probably a fairly fine balance to be called. I didn't, not that I was aware, but I didn't become, mental Phats or crazy Phats or any of that sort of stuff. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm absolutely convinced there will be other examples of that, because, as you rightly point out, a key coping mechanism, providing you know why you're using it as a coping mechanism, can be the humour that you would find in a military environment, certainly on a flying squadron.